So hi everybody and welcome back. This is the presentation. You already seen that in my channel in other videos, about this last racing cast. We did it down here, and is of course referred to the Porsche, to the 1974 Porsche 3.0 RSR. This was probably the most common racing Porsche of the 70s. It was the customer car, so it was the 3-liter not turbo car, also racing against altogether the 934 that was indeed the factory car made by Porsche, and it was a turbo car, the 934, much more powerful than this version, but this was much more common and much more easy to spot in picture and in documentation of the time. So the cast is basically a recast of a model that I made nowadays. I think is about 10 or if not 15 years ago now. And when I started this project, I was just a little bit surprised that you cannot find so easy models, quality racing models about the body, because mostly the different part was the body of this car. And let me see if I also find the wheels. So the model that they made at the time was basically made after the A, B and C pillar coming from the 935 kit from Tamiya. It was at the time, I think it was, I started that model in 2010, and currently we are now in 2024. So at the time there was not so much around the 911 in the wide body versions, and we just had the flat nose 935 coming from there with completely different body shape. So I just kept the cockpit area, this area coming from the 935, and so that mold required to be up to date, to today's standard, to the stuff that I can make it today, and so I basically completely rebuilt the master using a different part, a much more precise and up-to-date area, much more bulged, nicer area around also the windshield details. And then I basically reworked on the body that I already made in 2010. Of course, after 15 years, I hope that my hands are a little bit better than what I can do back in the day, And back in time, I made this. I need two hands, to take it up the wheels to show you. And back in time, I made this model using a guy. It was the first caster that I had. I didn't have the quality caster that I had today. As you can see clearly, the mold is nicer than the cast we made in gray. It was a Porsche that you can see also in my channel. I placed there inside several videos. I made a car of this one completely open. Is the Jägermeister car, and it was molded in a gray resin. It was a smooth on gray resin coming from USA. But the problem with the smooth tone resin, it was the only resin we could have at the time, it was that it was quite easy to wrinkle and to bend, because it was extremely sensitive to weather condition. Instead this resin is much more crispy, and I dare to say also different quality. I don't dare to say better quality, because the smooth tone is the best quality resin ever you can have for figures. When you have to cast up soldiers and figures and small details, the smooth tone is incredible. This was still long before the arriving of the 3D printer, so it was a very high request of that type of resin to spot the details, but it was not so good to make a big surface like this one. This is a 1/24 scale, and my master had the little wrinkled area around the rear wheel arch. That was the main problem. It's also true that if you can see proper picture of the RSR of 1974, a little notice to everybody that buy my model, I can provide my personal folder with all the documentation that I have and that I used of the cars around the world to reproduce this model. So you have a huge database about the real stuff, so you can take inspiration, even if there are so many racer cars of this one today running around. So it's very, very easy to find documentation. Just Google for it, 1974 Porsche 3.0 3-liter RSR, and you will find a lot of material, you know. So basically right now in this model, I try to take it down the camera so I can use both of my hands. Basically what I reworked here in the biggest work was not at all to change the cockpit area, you know. I don't know how do you call this part in English, you know. In Italian language is padiglione. Padiglione is the cockpit area, you know. And you see that it is much more up to date and much more correct and bulged to be for a 911 series car, you know. And I also noticed that in my first mold, you know, making such kind of jobs, it happens that you recognize yourself, your mistakes, you know, and you are usually the worst judge of yourself. I noted that I probably copied the wheel arch coming from a replica car. Instead, the real 3.0 RSR had this type of front fender, you know, the start straight up, goes a little flat up here, and then returns straight down here. So it is not a completely rounded wheel arch. This was because if you look closely at the picture, usually the front wheel sits a little bit inside this part, you know. And also the setup of the car becomes much more lower, you know, is a little bit different to what I did in the first version, you know. Of course, also in this second mold, I wanted to, because this was anyway closed from inside here, you know, this under part was still coming from the front area of the 935 Tamiya. 935 was a good kit for the time, but they had a slightly different part and detail about also the wheel arch on the slant nose 935, so it was a little bit mistaken over the wheel arch also. So I corrected the part and I used it also for this, as well as at the time I left also in my first mold the lights over the model here. So it's up to you if you want to keep this one on the model, or if you just can cut it out with you know, take just a razor blade. Should have several here it is, you know, you just have a razor blade and you can cut it completely away, this one, and drill the hole to replace it. I don't know if it is needed, you know, because this is exactly the light coming from Tamiya, so I just used the front light from Tamiya. In my opinion, even if I indicate like a donor kit, the Revel 934 is of course, in my opinion, much better if you can use the Tamiya 934. Usually Tamiya kits are nicer and they are becoming a little more pricey, and anyway, the detail is much better. All the proportion of the 934 from Tamiya are better than the Revel one, so in my opinion it's better to use that one. This is anyway the light coming from Tamiya, because I liked it a lot, you know. Inside they had already the, I hope you can see from my camera, they already had the front light there inside, so it's quite easy to fix. This also you can fit from inside, you know. It's enough that you drill from this side. As you can see, there is already the transparent resin holes for that side, so you can place the R of marking there, you know. This was the version with this different front bumper, you know. They had several different. There was also the Brumos car that was completely closed here, much more bigger in this area, so just check picture for the version that you are going to reproduce, and I think is absolutely well done and spotted on, you see. The shape is exactly that. Is a huge fat body Porsche from the 70s, you know. Inside my kit you will find also the rear wheel. This is the rear wing, sorry. This is the rear wing coming from the RSR series. It is not the same one that you can find in the 934. 934 had a much shorter one, so this was a specifically wing used on the RSR 3-liter, you know, so it was specific for her. I also made a tutorial because, you know, when I made the original cast from this model, I used a very thin body part, you know. It's extremely difficult, guys, to print this stuff in a thin resin, you know, so it's extremely complicated, and you require really professionally stable to do this stuff. It is not something that you can try it at home, because you will end just trashing a brick of rubber and silicons and trash also resin. So it's much better, I think, that you find something already done. And also this rear wing have been completely rebuilt because it have to fit the different spaces from the body. I let anyway some details up to your taste. So as I said, the front light you can decide if keep or not, or if remove and rework it to have I don't know what, because I made a couple of them more than a couple of them in the past, and it was not this big issue at all to have this. You just paint your model, you finish it, then you mask it, and it's already fitted over. So I don't have any problem with it. I don't have any issue with this part, as well as, for example, also this side. It depends from cast to cast, because this is an extremely thin part, and as you can see, it already arrived nearly damaged in the cast. It's too thin. I don't know if there is somebody around the world able to to cast this stuff this way. So in some models, it's also very easy to cut it away. You look, for example, this is another cast that we made. There is some of them that arrived without the line of the deflector on the side door. It's very easy. It's a evergreen strip styrene that also, of course, on this model, this is a body that I will use for my own production, for the models that I want to use. I have several decals of this car, so it's very easy to cut it away and make it in better condition, so because there is anyway some bumps and some problems. It's also very easy to fit the transparent parts, so I think whatever kind of 911, of modern 911 you have, it's absolutely easy to fit here the parts of the transparent. Of course, I didn't let the entire transparent thub, that they place inside kits, so you have to cut each panel one by one, or even better, rebuild it with acetate clear styrene, to make it in the proper way. I also made a video because sometimes when we made the cast of this stuff, is very easy that very thin part like this one are a little bit bended, and I'm placing in YouTube now a short video where you can absolutely see how easy it is with a little higher dryer for 2-3 seconds to heat it a little and keep it straight, like I did right now here. I made it 2 minutes before I started the video, and you see it's already completely hard. You see the sound is not soft, is not moving, and it fits perfectly to the rear wing. So this is absolutely easy to do, Of course, being a body made basically in plastic in the origin, this is still the parts coming from the plastic original kit of 2010 that I used, but all the models have been reinforced exactly in the way that they do to slot car bodies. This is a body that you can also easily use for slot racing. I don't know if they did a decent body of the 3.3 liter RSR in 124 to race, but this is not so heavy at all. It's quite light stuff. It's not like the Studio 127 stuff that you can find very thick resin, very hard to work, extremely crispy resin. This is just a body shell. I like this type of bodies in this way, exactly in this way. Of course, some details like this one you have to work by your own. I used to sell my bodies already partially cleaned. I made it basically cleaning up to make all the parts fit good together. Like, for example, you see the wheel arch. The rear wheel arch fits perfectly inside the wheel arch. Of course, it's you that have to make the measure, because this RSR was famous to have a huge rear tires. There is some picture indeed of the 911 RSR that they made from Jägermeister that was featuring nearly Formula 1 tires. So I think you have to check carefully the picture. Modern replicas have a slightly smaller tires, but I used this one, and in this newest kit I wanted to add at a slightly little higher price, because after, of course, 15 years the prices can increase a lot. Everything increases a lot in modern life, so it's obvious that something increases, but I increased very little on this model, offering more parts, I think. For example, the wheels. This was the wheels, was the 917 rim. I think it was a BBS rim adapted to the 911 RSR, fitting and already done slick tire, for this. And I think it's a good idea, because I've seen that in the past was not so easy to find these 5-sprocket wheels to be fitted over the RSR. This was the specific wheel for this Porsche, so you have this. I try to make the center in my camera. It's not so easy, my hands are here, so I'm just talking to the telephone, and I hope the audio is decent, because in my video sometimes the audio is not so perfectly settled, And that's it. There is some minor detail, of course. Every time you are talking about this type of resin conversion, we are talking of stuff that is meant to be used by quite experienced modeler or assembler. So this is a model that have to end in the hand of somebody that know what is he dealing with. We are talking of resin kits. Resin kits is all the negative stuff of the resin. They are quite expensive. They are a little tricky to work. There can be some issues, you know. You have, of course, to prepare your body in your own way to make it fit in the best way ever, you know. I was thinking to use this stuff over a 934 undercarriage, you know, mostly because the internal cockpit of the 934 is already prepared like to be a racer, you know, so you don't have the rear seat to be removed, or you don't have to recreate anything at all about this stuff. You just have to use the inner part from 934, and I think for $30 you can find it all over, as well in Europe, as well in America, or whatsoever, you know. And it's very, very easy because the dash is simple, you know. Just check carefully the picture, because remember, in the reality, the parts coming from a 934 turbo RSR, it was a much more huge, powerful machine. So in the real car, they didn't have the needing to make it extremely lightweight. So the body, I think they still can carry the original radio inside the 934. There was still the part coming from the production, because the power was so huge that they didn't have any requiring for such one. Instead, this one, despite it was a deadly winning car, you know, in every category of the ordinary racer, this was the winning car. It was something that you have to beat, and was not so easy at all to beat, you know. So just check carefully the picture of the vehicle that you have to do, and the specific version of the car that you have to do. There is plenty of decals around of them. I think I have a couple from Arena Modelli made back in time, a model of this with a different mast, you know. There was some lines here on the rear fender that I was not convincing me. That's why I went for my own body conversion and so on. That was a complete kit that I used to sell some years ago. He had a huge part of photo etched set to make the frame and so on. I think it's not so necessary in this type of model to have this type of details that Arena Modelli places, but the decals were good, and I think if you contact the company, they still had for sale at least the decal from the Samsung car, the blue and the yellow car, as well as the Jägermeister car, exactly the vehicle that I already made. Then there is plenty of decal. There is the Toblerone car. There is millions of variants, of different variants of the 3-liter RSR. In my opinion, this is the nicest body shape ever used on a historical racer 911. You see, this was the purity of the 911. Look. Not because I made it, but I think we really raised at least my top, the best that I can do on such kind of bodies, you know. And I plan to build up at least 3 or 4 model of this. That's why I made, as you can see here, don't look at the mess that I have around me. I made quite a big batch. The unfortunately part is that the batch that you're currently seeing is already completely sold out. So I'm waiting for the end of the month. I'm making this video now that is the May of 24. And I'm waiting for the end of the month another batch of 30 cars. So I hope that I can satisfy all the people that is asking me for this wonderful body, and it was a huge success. You know, I didn't believe it so much when I recasted it, because this was indeed my real first resin conversion that I did back in time when I started all this adventure in making resin bodies, you know. And mostly because I liked the car, so it was not something made for a company, so it was me that was loving so much the 911 RSR from the 70s, you know. And it was a huge success, despite my skill of the time, and despite the trouble that we had, as I said in the beginning of this video, about the production of the first bodies. It was a huge success, and I've seen plenty of videos of pictures also of modelers around the world that made, I remember my friend in Sweden, Lars Gustafsson, an incredibly skilled Swedish modeler, one of the best ever they have up there. And he made an amazing model using one of my bodies. I remember that we met together in my place in Marstrand in Sweden, and it was very, very nice to see how they did, you know. Also, he pointed out that situation about the resin, you know, but he had no major issues to fix that body. So it was an hour-some job, you know. If you search for it, he finally made it with Västkuststugan, you know. It was a Swedish company racing with the 911s in the 70s, you know. It was a Swedish car. Fantastic model, you know. So I plan to make much more right now, at least one Toblerone car, one Samsung car, and I don't know what, maybe also just an ordinary cliente version, client customer version, you know, for my own pleasure, you know, because the one that I already made, it was a mighty model, you know. When the last stuff that the last competition that I won with that model was the last year in a Porsche dealer outside Monza. You know, they made a competition just giving pricing around Porsche modeling, you know. And I was so happy because I could collect with that display. I made a display with both the 934 and the 3-liter RSR completely fully opened, you know. So you need to study carefully because I made the display when the Tamiya model arrived on the market, so we are talking of 2013. Instead, this model have been made in 2010, and I wanted to place them together because both were extremely similar looking car. You know, one was the RSR and the other one was the 934 RSR. RSR, I think, is the shortest version of the terrible German word that means Rennsport and whatsoever. You know, I'm not talking German at all, so I know that is Rennsport. It means racing, you know, and I made the display and it was able to win the competition in the Porsche category, but the car is, in my opinion, wonderful but completely open. You know, I opened the doors. You know, it's also quite easy here. If you look at that, you can follow the lines. There is not so big issue. You know, the resin here is not so thick at all. So you can cut as you want. You can cut the door. The rear engine bay is already open. You know, this because for cast purpose, it's much better to have this part separate, you know. As well as if you want to go for a nice detailing of this or also working hinges for the rear back, you can make the rear edge completely open and you can show the inner part. You know, also there you have to check carefully the picture because, as I said, in this particular occasion you cannot use directly straight out from the box the Revel engine. You know, the engine of the RSR 934 is provided with Revel. But why? Because the original Revel had the engine with the different carburetors pipes over and mostly with a huge turbo coming outside here. You know, the 934 was cut here. They had a huge huge rocket turbo coming from the under part. Instead, the 3-liter RSR was different. It was a ordinary, not turbo car, so you have to study carefully the picture. It's a little bit of work, but you have the base. You know, if you have any of the Fujimi enthusiast model, this body also will fit over a Fujimi model, but you have to find something that have a racing interior. So just check carefully the donor kit you want to use. As I said, millions of motor parts for the 911 are coming from the Fujimi, you know, and it's very, very similar to that type of kit if you have the possibility. If you are looking this video, means that you are a piston head about Porsches, you know, you love it, you are a car freak like I am, so you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you have probably a lot of model kits about the 911 around your stash, so you just can check the part, check the real reference picture, check my reference when I give you my folder when you have my body, and just check the version that you are going to produce and the version that you're going to build in the best way ever. You know, I think it's absolutely easy kit, and this is one of the nicest body we ever produced in this scale, and I'm so glad that right now a lot of people is enjoying again and again this mighty Porsche. You know, they have big asses, they have big shape, big curves. Is extremely sexy. You see, the body is extremely sexy of this 1974 Porsche. Last but not least, I also remolded the rear bumper. You know, in the original version, this part was okay in my master, but didn't come as I wanted in the mold. Instead, this way became, you know, this was a special version used, I think it was a part in fiberglass, you know, used on the real stuff. You know, several cars also have a hollowed part, they have a different grill here, and the parts are already modified. It's not so difficult, you know, because the resin here is not so thick, so I think if you make it even more lighter, you can work quite easy inside this part, and of course a lot of dry fit must be used before you finally go for the assembly of this model. I simply love this car. I hope also that you love that too and you like my model. That's it, guys. Enjoy it and take it as soon as you can, because I see that it's a huge success. You know, I didn't expect that the first batch completely went sold out in 48 hours, so I'm really glad for it. And I will do more because this is now currently in production. So right now this model is available, and don't miss the nicest Porsche of the 70s, the Eraser, you know, not slick stuff to go around hanging around on the seaside. This was strictly a racing car. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next.